Hello everyone and welcome to one of my first parts of my Brontë journey. Today I'm starting not at the beginning of the Brontë journey, but in a way the beginning of the Brontë family as we know it now. I'm currently standing in the old bell chapel in Thornton, just down the road from the Brontë Birthplace, which is now opened up to the public and is in public ownership too, so I'm really excited to go. The reason I wanted to bring you here to the Old Bell Chapel is because this is where Patrick came in 1815 in the backdrop of Waterloo, kind of some massive events going on in Europe. The Brontë family, Patrick, Maria and their two children, Maya who was only one and Elizabeth was just a baby, they arrived here and Patrick took up the perpetual curacy of Thornton. Thornton is the birthplace of the Brontës that we love so much. Charlotte was born in 1816, so just a year after they moved here, followed by a boy. I feel like we always need to mention Branwell. Patrick Branwell was born in 1817, followed by Emily in 1818 and also Anne in 1820. Because I'm a nerd, I researched this and I have some notes. When I was looking about descriptions of Thornton at the times when the Brontës were in, we always go back to Elizabeth Gaskell. Now we all know the life of Charlotte Brontë by Elizabeth Gaskell is incredibly biased, and also the one thing I'm looking at the moment is the myth making around the Brontës and the way we think about them, especially in relation to their landscape. So Elizabeth Gaskell in the life of Charlotte Brontë described Thornton as desolate and wild, great tracts of bleak land enclosed by stone dykes. Now famously Gaskell didn't really like the landscape of West Yorkshire that much, but it is interesting to me that this almost myth of, well, it's not necessarily a myth because they are associated with the wilderness and the wild, but the kind of the myth making we have around the Brontës, the imagery of the landscape we have of the Brontës is desolate and wild and all of these kind of words, and it's interesting to me that even in Gaskell's mind that kind of language and descriptions of their landscape and also them as writers or where they really came from started here at Thornton. Just before we head over to the actual birthplace, I wanted to begin at the chapel because so much of the Brontës, their move to Haworth is obviously based on Patrick as a curate. And Thornton is also the place where the name Brontë appears as we know it now in print, but it was Patrick Brontë, not his daughters, obviously, because they were babies. I also think it's interesting that actually it was the youngest daughter Anne who really kind of led one of the reasons that the family left Thornton to Haworth, mainly because he now had 6 children and a wife, and campaigned for more money or a change in her circumstance, which led him to go to Haworth in 1820. The transition wasn't easy, and we'll get to have a little bit later on, but for now let's go slightly back in our journey and go to the birthplace to see where the Bluff sisters were born. As soon as you walk in, you are on the original flagstone floor that the family themselves would have stepped upon. From the hall opposite the staircase, you have on the right the family room, the most intimate room in the Brontë house. I can really just imagine this family of 8 all gathered around a table in this room, and then as you go back into the hallway, on the opposite side there's a more formal one. And I'm currently standing in their greeting room, so the poshest room in the house, and I've also been around basically touching every fireplace, because in front of one of these fireplaces, we don't know which one, and it's a bit of lore. The Brontë girls, the Brontë sisters, were brought into the world in front of the fireplace. I'm aware because this was the greeting room, they wouldn't have been born in front of this fire, but it is one of the prettiest ones and it's very ornate, so it's kind of currently my favourite. But there is something really special about being in a house and in rooms that they were born in and spent their really, really early years into. Because this was the greeting room, this is also the room where Patrick did all of his business. And so this would have been a really busy part of the Brontës' house because they're really social and had lots of friends locally. So I'm sure he would have been inviting not only his friends but also maybe some of his parishioners into this room as well. We're now in the scullery, and the Brontës, while they were here, had 2 maids, including Nancy, who will go and see her room, who came with them to Haworth where they left Thornton. And even though this room has been slightly changed over the years and it had a big open kitchen, it's really beautifully restored. And one thing, even from the greeting room and the entrance, how much, even though they don't have any furniture, obviously from the Brontës, because it all went to Haworth and then got sold on, they've been able to restore the building so beautifully, but also put in so many period pieces that you still feel like maybe Patrick's just gone out for a walk and the children are upstairs in the nursery. We go up these stairs to go to Nancy's room, and one thing I love is that these are the original steps, and as well as so much of the house has the original, obviously, flagstone stone. They're very steep, and I am very small, but they are so big and beautiful. Do you want to come and have a look, Ben? We're now at the top of the house in Nancy's room, and they have dress up, so of course, whenever there's an opportunity, I'm putting on a bonnet. They think this bedroom was actually the children's room, partly because, and I always love these little details you get when you have tours, the door here actually led up to Nancy's room. It's blocked off now so you can't walk on it, but they think that was Nancy so she could kind of come down and tend to the children and go back upstairs quietly. And I just love the little details like that I would never have known. This is the room that they think Patrick and Mariah slept in. And so I'm feeling like if that is the room, then potentially this fireplace is the one in which the Brontë sisters were born in front of. So much of this is original. It's the original flagstone as well in front of the fireplace. And there's also this really interesting kind of like fruit basket that has been painted over so many times. And what I really like about kind of seeing how this house has kind of been put together, because it's been so many different things. It has been a butcher shop, it's been a house, it's been a cafe. The creation team are finding all these little details from all of the different kind of inhabitants of this house. And so in a way, the house not only tells the story of the Brontes, but also, I guess, the wider story of Thornton as well. I think this might be my favourite thing out of this entire renovation of the Brontë Birthplace. This is a window that was obviously originally covered up, and this is actually the window that the children would look out of, and it would look out over to the Old Bell Chapel where their father was obviously the perpetual curate. And so I just have this beautiful image of the children against this window looking out to the countryside and to the church. And it's just so many little things in this place that just, you can imagine it as a home, and you can imagine how busy it would have been, but also how this is kind of, you know, where their lives started before they went to Haworth. It's really special. So it was from this small house in Thornton, Patrick and Mariah took their 6 children to Haworth when Patrick took up the perpetual curacy of the church in Haworth. So we're going to head there next and share a little bit more about the Brontë journey. Just before we head to Haworth, I wanted to come back to the Old Bell Chapel because we also want to go in the new church of St James, because in that church there is actually the original font that the children were baptised in. So we're going to go here, but I didn't realise until we walked here afterwards that obviously from this position you can not only stand within the old chapel, but be in the old chapel and then look up at the new church. But this is where it would have been in Patrick Bronte's time. This is the original font that was in the Old Bell Chapel, and in this font, or at this font, Charlotte, Patrick Bramwell and Elizabeth, so Elizabeth, Charlotte, Patrick Bramwell, Emily Jane and Anne were all christened here, with Mariah being christened at Hartstead. The church itself has some really special items linked to Patrick Brontë, from where he washed before he was taking his first sermon, or a desk that he might have used. But I think actually, when I was walking around the church and also the old chapel, with how many people kind of came up to talk to me, it made me realise just how much this community loves the Brontes and feels really proud of the connection that they have to them, quite rightly so. And you can tell even going to the old chapel with all of the planting that's going on there, or the community kind of activity and the renovation, the thought put into the renovation of the birthplace. And I feel like I was smiling, not only because I was in the birthplace of the Brontes, but also because of how people had come together to restore this thing so for generations of people can come. And I really hope more people will visit, if only because I feel like the people of Thornton deserve people to visit, really. Now, like the Brontë family, we make our journey to Haworth. In the Life of Charlotte Brontë, Elizabeth Gaskell described Haworth Parsonage as an oblong stone house facing down the hill on which the village stands, and with the front door right opposite to the western door of the church, distant about 100 yards. Of this space, 20 yards or so in depth are occupied by the grassy garden, which is scarcely wider than the house. The graveyard goes round house and garden on all sides but one. The house consists of 4 rooms on each floor and is 2 stories high. I'm now outside the Brontë Parsonage in Haworth, which is obviously now the Brontë Parsonage Museum, and I am in the graveyard, but obviously the house is just behind me, so you really get a sense of how close the graveyard was to the actual parsonage. This is obviously where the Brontes moved in 1820 from Thornton, which is obviously our first stop in this journey. The view of Haworth that I have is very picturesque and has obviously come to symbolise the beautiful, the wildness of the Brontes' writing. But obviously when Patrick moved here in 1820, And in fact, throughout the Brontes' lives, it was a bustling street, but it was also known to have one of the highest mortality rates as well, and it was comparable with some of the poorest districts in London. I have been reading The Brontes by Juliet Barker, and pretty much everything I now know about Haworth has come from this brilliant book. And as you can see by my annotations, I've loved reading this. It actually notes here that the high birth rate in the chapelry was matched by a high mortality rate. In the same period, 1820 to 1830, Patrick conducted on average 111 burials a year, rising in 1824 and 1830 to 140 a year. One thing I loved from reading this book is actually, I had no clue that Patrick Brontë himself was as active a campaigner as he was, and it really shows who he was as a curate and also the fact that he cared about the health and well-being of his parishioners. You can really still imagine the parsonage as it was. Apart from the extension, the front is, you can imagine it kind of being on the edge of the moors, and when you're walking around going into the dining room, you can it's almost like they've just left, and you can almost hear the sisters, you know, collaborating together and chatting and then playing in the children's attic too. Now, the last time I came to the Brontë Parsonage, I was really lucky. When me and Ariel came here, we were allowed to film inside, which isn't normally allowed, so it's very special. While I continue to read more about the Brontes, I will leave you to enjoy some of the clips that I filmed on my visit. Travel back in time with me to the Brontë Parsonage. Gentlemen, may I request to be informed whether you would undertake the publication of a collection of short stories in one volume? If you object to publishing the work at your own risk, would you undertake it on the author's account? I am, gentlemen, your obedient servant, C. Brontë. I wish to tell the truth, but truth always conveys its own moral to those who are able to receive it. I trust I have gained more than I lost. I hope I may venture to say that I am wiser and better. I wonder, what shall we be like, and what shall we be, and where shall we be, if all goes well in the year 1874, in which year I shall be in my 57th year, Anne will be going into 55th year, Branwell will be going to 58th year, and Charlotte in her 59th year, hoping we shall all be well at that time. I'm just going to write because I cannot help it. Papa, I've been writing a book. Have you, my dear? And he went on reading. But Papa, I want you to look at it. I think I shall gain some money by it. May I read you some reviews? There is not room for death, nor atom that his might could render void, since thou art being and breath, and what thou art may never be destroyed. Unlike a lot of other authors, the Brontes were famous in their own lifetime. So the Brontë Parsonage Museum has so many interesting pieces from their childhood up to their adulthood, and also up to their deaths as well. It is one of the best museums. I love it so much, which is why I come really regularly. And you could also support the museum by becoming a Brontë Society member, which of course I am because I'm a massive nerd. And I'll put all the links for that in the description. One of the things I find most moving about coming to Brontë Parsonage is actually not inside, and it's in the garden. There is, where the gate was, there is a plaque saying that this is where the Brontes did their last journey, apart from Anne, obviously. Anne was in Scarborough, also not having a great time, but through the gate is where they went to be buried at the church. Both Charlotte and Emily are buried in the new church, the one that replaced the old church where their father spent his years working. Although there aren't any direct Brontë family members buried in this churchyard, there is an adopted one, Tabby. Tabitha Ackroyd was a loyal servant of the Brontë family since 1824, and she died shortly before Charlotte in 1855. And for me, the fact that she's buried in this churchyard is really important and a beautiful thing. It just shows how much they loved Tabby and how much of a member she was of the family. There are also obviously the Brontë pets. who I think are buried probably somewhere, maybe around the back of the Brontë Parsonage. But Grasper and Keeper and Flossie, I think the Brontë pets is like one of my favourite things about their writing. How often the pets pop up in Emily and Anne's diary papers, or how also they sneak into the novels too. It's incredible to think that from this parsonage on the edge of the moors came some of the greatest works of English literature ever written. The fact that three sisters together have created like my favourite novels. Every time I come, I'm awestruck by their writing and how much they made Yorkshire come alive as well. As we're coming to the end of this video, and it's now golden hour, and as we've been walking around the churchyard, one particular quote from Wuthering Heights kept coming back to me, which is the very end of the novel, which feels like a really beautiful way to end. I lingered round them, under that benign sky, watched the moss fluttering among the heath and harebells, listened to the soft wind breathing through the grass, and wondered how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth. After their first collection of poems in 1846, the Brontë sisters went on to write 7 novels, including Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. The Brontë Society is one of the oldest literary societies in the world, and the Parsonage Museum welcomes hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and there'll be a lot more in my Brontë journey, so I look forward to sharing more videos with you. Do you think this is the first Labubu to visit the Brontë birthplace? I mean, she's very honoured to be here. She's had a great time. Look at her face, she's overcome excitement.